Okay, let's get started. I've started the recording, so welcome everyone. I wanted to present today the draft of the first part of the Mojaloop strategy we've been working on. This has been reviewed within the foundation, but has not been reviewed except very, very quickly at the recent MojaCom, where I raced through the whole thing in 10 minutes, something like that. So I am going to share my screen, and if I can find the right one. There we are. Share this screen and put it in slideshow mode. And I'm hoping you can all see that. So there's a lot to cover. I'm only going to cover the roadmap for the next 2 years, thereabouts. I welcome any comments. If you want to follow up in the Product Council Slack channel or messages to me directly, that's fine. Let's get started. So, okay, short term, the next 6 months. These are the work streams that are really the bread and butter of the Mojaloop community. I've split them into two. The stuff that's about just getting Mojaloop deployed and all the DFSBs connected and the hub performing properly. There are 3 work streams: deployment tools, participation tools, and performance optimization. These have been going for quite some time now. They've made significant progress. For example, deployment tools has developed an entirely new deployment tool called IAC Lite, which is going to be published soon to make deployment more straightforward. The ultimate aim is one-click deployments, but of course that's an ambitious target. And then participation tools have made significant improvements in the ease and reliability of onboarding DFSBs to a Mojaloop hub. And many of you here on this call have put significant work into that work stream, so thank you. And similarly, performance optimization. And out of that has recently come a white paper demonstrating Mojaloop performance at more than 1,000 TPS, in fact, close to 2,000 TPS. And details of the configuration you need to achieve that. So that's been a very valuable effort that I expect to continue for some time in the future. Separately, there's the maintenance stuff that we need to make sure that Mojaloop continues to be reliable and is released as changes are made. So platform quality and security is another of the long-term work streams, which is all about fixing all the bugs and in particular addressing security concerns and updating also dependencies on other open source projects, for example, which is an infeasibly large number of projects. And then core and releases, which is all about building the next release, testing it, and managing that release process. So those 2 work streams are fairly tightly integrated, and they're both managed by Sam, the technical director. That's all about essentially enabling business as usual. And then we have other active ones, current ones. So we have participation tools for fintechs and dispute management, which we're awaiting some community donations there. And hopefully that will happen sometime in the near future. And we have the LEI addressing work stream, which is a collaboration with the Global LEI Foundation to enhance merchant payments, to include the incorporation of an LEI into the transaction, which uniquely identifies the merchant globally. And a very important work stream, the Mojaloop Evolution work stream, where we're replacing the Mojaloop core ledger technology with currently based on MySQL to Tiger Beetle, which is a financial ledger technology. And that will also include the adoption of a new accounting model and updating settlement to V3 to support the most complex deployments. And that's not only does that introduce a more rigorously accounted baseline for Mojaloop deployment, but it also promises something of an order of magnitude and improvement in Mojaloop transaction speeds and capacity. There are three work streams which have recently kicked off. One is PISP 2.0, where we're enhancing our existing PISP functionality to meet some broader requirements of adopters. It is a requirement that raised by multiple adopters. It's never the first one, obviously, but once somebody has a Mojaloop deployment live and running, then PISP is a fast follower in terms of requirements. Forensic audit functionality. We have an audit capability within the Mojaloop ecosystem, but it's not forensic. So we have an active work stream now looking to improve our audit capabilities to improve the reliability to a legal standard. And that is something that will come as a requirement fairly soon for a number of adopters. And localization, a work stream that we kicked off just this week. It's initially focused on translation of the Mojaloop documentation into French, but it's also adding structure to support multiple languages. And in an unexpected development yesterday, somebody in that workstream demonstrated some of our documentation in Portuguese. So it's no longer just English. There is French documentation coming very soon, and we are if anyone wants to complete the translation into Portuguese, they'd be most welcome, because that is another requirement that we've heard. Software localization will be addressed at a later time. That means essentially the finance portal and also error log messages, for example, being available in multiple languages. And then there's a few work streams where we've heard are high priority, but we haven't had the capacity to do anything about yet. One is logging. The logging of hub activity is highly variable across modules. It's not good enough. It's the logging that is done by a module within Mojaloop has historically been defined by the developer. There are no standards, or there were no standards about that. Now, the DRPP project has highlighted this issue and has also proposed a standard for logging. And the Mojaloop Foundation is working with the community to consider the adoption of that standard, which will necessitate the updating of many of the Mojaloop modules to improve logging to meet those standards. There's a general need to improve adopter documentation. It's not just language. We always need to improve and extend our documentation. And finally, finance portal strategy. We have an existing finance portal, but we're increasingly being told it's not fit for purpose. And all three of our SIs have already developed their own. We have a draft definition document for what a finance portal is, and I hope to share that with the community soon. And we can then use that to measure each SI's version of a finance portal against the ideal. And then things that might become important in the future, which we're not forgetting about, which is one which is actually related to G2P. We may need to do some work on our bulk functionality. It works now, but we think that for nation scale bulk payments, we can make it more efficient. It should be a relatively small task, and it's something that once an adopter says they need it, then effort, I'm sure, will be focused on that. The current FX solution will need extension in the future. At the moment, it only supports one business model, and it will be extended in the future to support multiple business models. But again, until an established operator says this is a need, we're not going to expend any further effort on it. And there's a general issue, a general comment about we need to understand other adopters' priorities. One of them is card payments, which we know that we can facilitate, but there are regulatory issues around that and also legal restrictions and also offline payments. These will be addressed as they come around, as they come along and they become a priority. So the short-term release schedule, we have 17.2.0 out. Sam and his team have published those at MojaCom or shortly before. That's this current standard version that everybody should be trying to adopt and migrate to. 17.3 will come along probably in July, just before the next MojaCom. And we're hoping that standardized logging and support for forensic audit will be in there, along with PISP support, and hopefully we'll have the adopted dispute management portal there, and maybe early eye support for merchants will be included. Mojaloop 18 later in the year, we expect that to include, crucially, the Tiger Beetle change. And of course, that's the reason why we've gone through a major release, Mojaloop 18.0.0. And that will, of course, include a new accounting model, the settlement improvements, and also because there have been such fundamental changes, we'll need to update our reporting to match those changes, particularly around the new accounting model. Other matters. Sorry, did somebody say something? Michael?
No, not me.
Okay, I just thought I heard your voice. Other matters that we haven't defined as even a candidate work stream, but something that we need to think about over the next 6 months or so. First of all, APP fraud. This has been raised with me by a couple of people who work with adopters. We don't have a standard response to this at the moment. We need to do some thinking about how to deal with this. We know that some schemes around the world have adopted capability for a victim to report an APP fraud, which results in transaction holds and return transactions. But we obviously need to balance that against payer fraud, using APP fraud to cover their own fraud. G2P, we think we have a solution for this, but we recognize that adopters aren't seeing it. There isn't a meeting of minds here. We need a working group to collaborate with adopters to refine our approach and fill any gaps. So we can talk as much as we like about how we have the perfect G2P solution. If adopters aren't seeing it, then that means that we're not understanding, and we want to work with adopters to fill those gaps. Finally, we are hearing talk about a PSD for Africa. People familiar with the European payment space will be aware of the Payment Services Directive, PSD, and now, of course, PSD2, and probably coming along with PSD3. There is talk about a PSD for Africa, and this is reportedly coming out of the African Association of Central Bankers. And we need visibility of this because it could have significant impact on us, and we need to reach out to our contacts in the central bank community to gain some understanding of where that might be heading. I think it's still some way off, but we do need to be aware of it. Looking to the future now, beyond 6 months. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the background. What everyone thinks of as Mojaloop is this: a Mojaloop hub with an account lookup service with what we call oracles around it, which is all about alias resolution to DFSP. We have a settlement partner. DFSPs connect via participation tools, which link their back office into the Mojaloop hub. We have a PISP interface, and there are participation tools for fintechs, which will link them into the PISP capability. So that's what everyone thinks of as Mojaloop. But I want to extend it further, there are a bunch of overlay services. So all those things that we've just looked at there are great, but they're not sufficient to launch a payment service. We need more. And they're what we call the PSP services. We call the overlay services. So there are finance portals, for example. There's the merchant payments registry, the integration toolkit, dispute management, and some combination of these will be needed by every scheme. These aren't optional. We need them in order to create a viable ecosystem. And we are thinking that actually, rather than Mojaloop saying there is one version of all of these, we as the Mojaloop community should create effectively a marketplace where multiple versions can be viewed, and an adopter can choose which one they want to use and download it. We know that other open source communities do similar things, and we think that we can learn from their approach. So, for example, we know that our current 3 key implementers, Infotex, This Works, Wired-In, they've all developed their own versions of Finance Portal, and each of them has indicated some degree of willingness to donate, and this could be the foundation of the marketplace. One of the questions then about the marketplace is who is responsible for maintaining those donations, and who is to say what the quality of each donation is. So the first stuff, we need to define the requirements for each overlay needs to meet, and provide some form of scoring to rate how each contribution meets those overall requirements. And also, are there specific limitations to their use? For example, one implementation of a finance portal might be great for domestic transactions, but doesn't actually support management of cross-border transactions. One might be great on cross-border, but not be so great on, for example, how to manage merchant payments, etc. So I think we'll never come across a finance portal that meets all of the requirements, but that's not the problem. It's more about how closely they match the requirements and what the limitations are to their use. So we are, as I've said, we're already working on the development of a marketplace, and Julie, who's on this call, has defined a set of marketplace requirements, what a marketplace should look like. And we also have a set of finance portal requirements, which we are close to being able to share. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much on all of this. What are the overlay products? Well, the business operations portals, also known as the finance portal, the merchant payments module, testing toolkit, which I hope you're all familiar with, integration toolkit, which simplifies DFSP connections to the hub, ISO 8583 integration, which is about ATM cash withdrawals, MoSIP integration, that's like this is routing of payments to MoSIP-based digital identities, and in fact that integration is all about G2P, and a dispute management platform, which is hopefully coming soon. I will share this presentation after this, so I don't need to go through all of this now. But I would like to highlight the merchant payments module. We have it working. It works. You can do merchant payments using what we have now. You can download and use it. It will generate QR codes. It will route payments to those QR codes. But it's a proof of concept. It's not viable for use in a live deployment, and work is needed to bring it up to quality for a real-world deployment. And also, there's effort needed to support the LAI workstream, some of which has already been done, but we need still more. Yeah, I'll share this presentation later for those who are interested. Offline payments. There is an assumption that offline is legacy constraint. that disappears as coverage improves. But that's not actually the case in some of the markets that we are looking at, particularly in Southeast Asia, where offline remains an issue. And what we are finding is that even where there is supposedly an available network, they're often operationally unusable for payments because of intermittent signals, power constraints, data costs, etc. And unfortunately, we have found that failure of connectivity tends to coincide with things like market days, harvest, social transfers, etc., when capacity is put under strain. And we take the view that a system that works most of the time is exclusionary. So we're trying to say that offline capability isn't an exceptional feature. It's a baseline requirement for equitable access. I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can look at it later. What we do think, though, is that Mojaloop is never going to do offline payments. That's not what Mojaloop is. It's online, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't support offline. So offline capability can operate as a sub-scheme within a Mojaloop-based instant payment system, either as a sub-scheme or a companion scheme. So there can be offline layer with continuity at the edge and an online layer which supports all the Mojaloop features of liquidity, discipline, observability, governance. And it has to be subject to some form of reconciliation. So we think we can work with an offline scheme. We are never going to be an offline scheme, but we already offer the cash in, cash out capability. And anyone who knows anything about offline payments knows that that's where offline payments integrates to an online system, because that's what an ATM is ultimately. Yeah, I won't talk about this now. So we think we should collaborate with adopters in the implementation of offline payment solutions. We are seeing significant amounts of interest, but at most it's an overlay service. It's not a core Mojaloop service, and it will be supported via Kiko integration. Revalidation. Every other IPS, except maybe FPS in the UK, follows a similar two-step approach: discovery followed by transaction. We think that some of the approaches that are taken by the other citizens of the IPS space, people like Pix and API, they've addressed the problems by embedding agreement and transfer into a single phase. And we know that some of our adopters have said, why can't Mojaloop do this? We think that they're not as good as our approach. Our agreement of terms essentially is more robust. A failed transfer sometimes requires a reversal at the debtor institution, something that some DFSPs may struggle with because their core banking system isn't up to it, or which may itself fail. So agreement of terms provides a more robust alternative than the two-phase approach of the likes of Pix and UPI. So we need to strive to encourage adoption of our approach and to evangelize it in other schemes. An additional need for pre-validation, also known as agreement of terms, is the need for a mechanism to allow participants to exchange information about the data which each requires the other to provide. This is particularly important in cross-border transactions. But we do think that once implemented for cross-border, some institutions will seek to use the same functionality for domestic. So the Mojaloop community are engaged with CPMI. Michael is our representative there, and he's leading a working group on pre-validation. And we think that we can use that as a vehicle to try and convince others to adopt our approach. I will not go on with this anymore. I think I've made the point. I'll share this presentation later, as I said. Also, discovery. there's a lot of stuff that needs thinking here about the discovery process. Although our discovery protocols that we exist now, the discovery phase, they're a good fit to existing requirements. We think we might need to consider extending them further to provide richer data. For our cross-border face-to-face merchant transactions, such as we see in DRPP, the Gamesa project, let's assume it's QR code initiated. Beyond the data encapsulated in the QR code, what assurance is there that the merchant matches the creditor account? So, for example, for QR, we consider recommending data signing and certificate management and building it into the repos, and that needs work in the merchant payments overlay as well. So also consider sharing data such as, is this a business account? Has the account been flagged for possible fraud? So this is all about extension to some aspects of pre-validation into the discovery phase. Cross-border. We are at the start of a step change in cross-border transactions. We think the aim is ultimately to make them closer to domestic transactions in terms of usability and costs. Two examples, well, obviously DRPP, positioned to be an important regional hub. And Nexus, despite its global ambitions, is emerging as a potential regional hub for Southeast Asia. But there seem to have been a few obstacles to Nexus uptake. For example, small countries with bilaterals already in place for the bulk of their international transactions probably see very little advantage in a more general approach. And we are also aware of potential governance issues. Further, individual Mojaloop deployments might not see an advantage in connecting to Nexus. So therefore, what we actually think is could be a win for the entire sector might be interconnection of Nexus and DRPP, for example. But that's some way off, at least probably 2 years off. But we think that that could demonstrate the advantages of scale. And therefore, the strategy for Mojaloop should be to facilitate adopters in their interconnection with cross-border entities. I've mentioned Nexus, but also the SWIFT, TCIB, PAPS. The Mojaloop community should provide the tools for technical integration and leave the adopters to decide their business model. While at the same time, we should encourage the regional schemes to interconnect to other regional schemes. Post-quantum crypto. We are heading to a world where quantum computers, or what are known as crypto-relevant quantum computers, because there are many different types of quantum computer, will be available within 5 to 10 years. A basic quantum computer that can decrypt relatively weak crypto is available now, but it's not the industry. It can't handle the industry standard crypto. But we think that within 5 to 10 years, there will be quantum computers that can essentially retrieve the keys from industry standard, payment industry standard cryptography. Now, why does that matter? Well, at the moment, we hear anecdotes that there are people who are hacking systems to retrieve the data at rest that is held as encrypted on the assumption that within that 5 to 10 year timescale, they will be able to decrypt it. It's what's known as a harvest now, decrypt later attack, an HNDL attack. And they're taking the encrypted data from sensitive systems, storing it on the assumption that it will be relevant in 5 years' time when they can decrypt it. So we need to migrate to post-quantum crypto. There are quantum computer resistant algorithms. NAST in the US has defined some algorithms for data at rest and data in transit. So data at rest now is vulnerable to HNDL attacks. We should be migrating to PQC really as soon as we can. Data in transit, transaction data, this classic crypto is probably fine for the next 5 to 10 years. So you could leave it until then, but there's a certain degree of chance there. So, go back. So we do need help in upgrading all of our crypto to the post-quantum algorithms in the relative near future, in the next 6 months, 2 years. RTP, there's a lot of work going on to enhance RTP. It's a layer above RTP. Mojaloop supports the RTP function, obviously, and it's a very useful and valuable transaction type. But a number of adopters, particularly across Europe and the UK and Brazil and India, are adding extra layers above. So, for example, there's the idea of variable recurring payments. There's going to be an FPS upgrade coming soon, which essentially moves away from mandates and direct debits and moves them into the RTP world. And it allows variable amounts and timings, and it provides customers with greater control and flexibility. So you know you get an RTP and you have to actually approve it before it goes out. It won't be mandatory. Banks can decide whether or not to implement it, but customer attraction is likely to be a driving force there. There's also a merchant initiated request to pay coming. In the EU, SEPA request to pay is now live across the EU, and they've extended it to add the extra functionality of accept now or accept later for the payee, and pay now, pay later it's the payer who has to define whether they want it now or they will accept it later, and the and the payee can choose to decide it as well. It works over the existing SET rails, and PSP can choose which features they support. It's a matter for differentiation, not a regulatory must-have, as is the case in the UK. Brazil and Pix, they're building services over the top of RTP as well. They have a new recurring payment service, Pix Automático, and they have a new BNPL project called Pix Parcelado. And the important point there is that they're viewing this as a financial inclusion initiative, because in the case of Pix Automático, these are functions that are not normally available to lower income customers. So this allows them to carry out utility payments, digital subscription payments, and it strengthens their digital finance profile, and therefore medium long-term inclusion. The BNPL project is all about extending credit to those who don't have access to traditional credits. So it's reducing the reliance on high-cost informal lending, and also it builds on the widespread, more or less universal adoption of PIX, for example. So RTP is becoming mainstream. And at the heart of Mojaloop is the need to drive inclusion. And it's not just about access to accounts, but also access to richer payment services to actually make people fully included. Access to recurring payments and a simple but formal credit capability are seen as major enablers. As I've said already, I'll repeat myself. So Mojaloop should consider some enhancements to RTP as a layer over the top of the core RTP functionality. I'm not saying what we should do, but the Mojaloop community should really start thinking about what they want to do in terms of extending the RTP framework, such as enabling recurring RTPs, enhancing control for customers by, for example, allowing them to place a ceiling on amounts and or frequency of requests, as well as precise payment dates, and consider further developments to support BNPL. I acknowledge these measures could be viewed as contrary to the soul of Mojaloop, and so we have to take care. But conversely, True inclusion means not just generalized access to a portfolio of financial services, but actually thinking about what people need, in particular in the financially underserved sector, leveling up through the provision of appropriate services. ISO 222, I promise you this won't go on forever. Um, ISO 222 is becoming the de facto standard for payment systems worldwide. And we are seeing that in terms of adopters who, in many cases, in fact, I think in every case over the last 6 months, ISO 222 has been specified. Mojaloop's message standards for IAPS, which have been published in a market practice document. This is an important element of this. In contrast, Swift rollout of CBPR Plus for cross-border and IP Plus for domestic, which you should note is a facilitator for integration with CBPR Plus, introduces some challenges because, like it or not, Swift has a greater reach than Mojaloop. And it seems as though some jurisdictions are likely to adopt IP Plus domestically. And this is going to affect their interoperability expectations. So Mojaloop community should strengthen our engagement with SWIFT, the World Bank, and other global bodies, moving towards a single coherent approach for payment discovery and transaction pre-validation. And Michael's engagement with CPMI and the broader ISO 222 community is a key element of this. And we are therefore at risk of adopters and regulators imposing their own definitions, reducing Mojaloop's influence and alignment. And so Michael is at the forefront of our response to that. Stable coins and tokenized deposits. There's lots of activity around the world. I won't go through it, but the key message is it's great, but none of it is directly relevant to Mojaloop. We need to keep a watching brief on this area. There's no specific action in terms of our core activity of switching transactions, but we remain interested in the use of either stablecoins or tokenized deposits for the purposes of settlement. We have been around the houses multiple times on how we could use these for, particularly in the terms of cross-border settlement or domestic settlement, but we have failed to find any use case as yet which gives significant advantage to Mojaloop or the wider Mojaloop community. But we will keep watching. QR codes. We already have a QR code solution. It's in the merchant payments module. Anyone can download and use it, but we need to extend it further for QR code interoperability. Southeast Asia is actively shaping regional and international interoperability. I've already mentioned Nexus, and Mojaloop needs a presence in these discussions to ensure we are aligned with QR code interoperability in particular. The main obstacle in cross-border QR payments is unique merchant IDs. Each country tends to define their own merchant IDs, but we know IDs serve as the routing target for merchant payment overlays. We have some key initiatives with the Glyph Foundation to support routing via LEIs, which will help for formal merchants. And we're looking to work with Glyph to extend LEI reach to SMEs in particular, but those micro merchants, the informal merchants, street vendors, etc., they're never going to get a legal entity identifier. So we need a solution for merchant identifier uniqueness for those casual merchants. And we need to do some significant thinking around that. So priority one, enabling interconnection with other IPS networks. I've already talked about that. We have to develop the enabling technology and standards. Second, we need some form of working group to identify the best routing mechanism for those casual merchants. MSI ISDN may be appropriate, but we really need to think about fraud and scalability. So we need clarity around the need to support micro merchants and the more complex merchant structures. So a large merchant with multiple outlets, multiple tills within each of those outlets, we need to be able to support them. So that's the medium-term roadmap, supporting offline payments. So I've tried to use a color coding here. So green refers to working groups and collaboration, and blue is actual technical work. So supporting offline payments, ISO 202 engagement, and building an overlay marketplace, pre-validation alignment with BIS, CPMI, technical support for cross-border interconnects, enhancing RTP to support richer business models, cross-border support for micro merchants, and a migration to post-quantum crypto. They are the key elements of this medium-term roadmap. I realize I've been pretty quick. I'll leave the long term to the next session. I suppose it's open to any questions now. We have some time. And I will be sharing this after this, and you can ask questions directly on the Product Council Slack channel. Steve has raised his hand. Steve, I'm losing my voice. Sorry.
Hey, Paul. Sorry if I have background noise. I think this is amazing. I love the clarity of what's required. I think there are some that to me are particularly interesting. And the ones that come up very often are, for example, is the cross-border. We talk to a lot of adopters about that on a regular basis. And I think what would be great, and so the question is, how do we get to a point where, for example, that the two things you talked about of the business priorities of allowing adopters to connect into regional and global systems, and then also enabling regional systems to connect. How do we get to a point where there's an analysis of what's required on the Mojaloop product to achieve those? And I'm guessing there's a few that I would say similar, but for that one in particular, how do we get to that point? Because I feel like we know that's the business priority. I'm trying to figure out how do we get to that. So that's my question.
Okay, I think the important point is to remember that we're never going to actually do that integration or operate those schemes. So our input has to be limited to, well, from the technical perspective, we need to support that technical integration. We as a community and as a foundation need to make sure that the technical resources are in place to support that integration. And then we need to work with adopters who are interested in exploring that to develop the business model around that. So it's two separate things, I feel. We're never going to do it. An adopter has to feel that there is a business advantage in doing that connection. So
yeah, no. And so I think my point is, if that's where we are, and that's what the issue is, that it's, as it stands, is perfectly capable in its current form. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I lost you for a few seconds, but you're back.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
No, if the product as it stands right now is perfectly capable of connecting into Nexus and TCIB and PAPS, it's going to be a bespoke integration, but the core product is ready to go. Is there something that's a product roadmap, or is that a business roadmap? Is there something in the core product that makes it more difficult to connect to those cross-border systems? That's my question.
Well, the cross-border solution that we have now is extremely good at connecting into other Mojaloop systems. It's not as good at connecting to non-Mojaloops, and there will need to be some technical integration there. We did review this with both Swift and PAPS, but we've never actually had an adopter who has wanted to do it, so it's never actually been implemented. There are issues around pre-validation with that as well, and there's work there that we can do to extend pre-validation and um, agreement of terms across into these other schemes, but we need to, I mean, that's essentially Michael's work with CPMI to make sure that we can extend into that. But so there's almost three parts to it. There's the technical integration just to be able to do it. There's the pre-validation and agreement of terms extension, which is through CPMI, and then there's an adopter who simply has a business case to do it. So we can't define the latter of those, but we can help with the former two. Julie, you had your hand up. Did you want to say anything?
I think I would agree with you that we looked at the integration with definitely Swift, and I would add Nexus and
Sorry,
within tax.
I'm sorry, I missed Nexus off my list, but you're quite right. Yes.
But I think like we never quite get the technical specification, and so produced a list of requirements overall, right? And making sure that these requirements are all crossed out. I think when we mean integration, actually, like, is probably wider than what is generally understood, because there is with this system, there is a direct integration with the network, but also this integration could generate other integration with different partners. And for example, I'm thinking of the settlement part for both Swift and Nexus, right? Which will also trigger other part of requirement.
And there's a business model integration as well, a business model translation almost.
Yeah, yes. And I think for me, when we discuss the business model integration, it's also related to the technical translation of some of the scheme rules. Yes. And whether it's achievable in the network per se. So there are a lot of work to be done, right?
Yeah. The interconnect is not just a technical interconnect. It's also an interconnect of business models, which is actually probably key to making it work. Yeah. Michael?
Thank you. I just really wanted to add to that in relation to Steve's comment that I think there is some more work stream type thinking that we need to do. Broadly speaking, I think these cross-border systems tend to fall into one of two classes. Either one that decouple the process of currency conversion from the process of connecting between schemes, or the ones which essentially expect the connector to be doing the currency conversion. So Nexus is an example of the second of those. Swift is an example of the first, and we are also an example of the first at the moment.
Yeah.
However, it may be that in order to connect with institutions like Swift or other institutions in that class, we may need to think about how we would offer one of a version of Mojaloop, which did scheme connection by currency converter, which is certainly, a theoretical model that I think was originally proposed by the European Central Bank, but has been round a number of iterations since, and I think forms the basis of some of the Nexus thinking, or quite a lot of the Nexus thinking.
Can you expand on that a little, please?
Oh yeah. So there was a paper that came out probably 4 or 5 years ago now, I think, from the European Central Bank, or some people at the European Central Bank, that essentially looked at how cross-border payments could be made more efficient and lower cost. They looked at a number of different ways of doing this, but the way in which they came, they plumped forward fairly heavily, and I think their subsequent things have increased that emphasis. Say, what you need is to have a series, a set of jurisdictional national payment systems using the same currency, connected together by institutions of whatever kind, which both perform the currency conversion and perform the interconnection and articulation of orchestration. So that's, as I say, it's a kind of theoretical position, which is, as I say, it forms the basis of Nexus, and it's certainly something that I think we ought to consider whether, and if so, how, Mojaloop should also provide that way of doing things. But I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is we shouldn't necessarily assume that because we do connection at the moment in a particular way, we shouldn't have alternative ways of doing it.
Right, yes. Thank you, Michael. E, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So I have three questions. The first one is about the QR code data, passing the QR code data to the payee organization that you mentioned about expanding the list of data that we can pass in the account lookup service. So currently, we are designing a QR payment for one of the projects that we are working on. In our in current design, what we are doing is to pass the main ID and sub ID in Gabadi API, the first call, and passing all the other information as the extension list in second call, which is code call. So that's what we are trying to do. Since Mojaloop doesn't support adding other information rather than ID in the first call. So if you have any better idea for that, please let me know. And I also would like to highlight the need for expanding and the information to pass in the first call. So can we add that requirement in the roadmap as well? That's first one. Second one is about the pre-validation step. You mentioned about the Mojaloop way of doing the pre-validation. So as far as we understand, currently we are doing like a two-phase commit in the project that we are working on. Firstly, we map one of the API with their validation API from the TFSP and do the final credit posting in later stage. So that's what to avoid the dispute transaction. So that's what we are doing in the project. But I want to understand more how Mojaloop want to encourage, what's the right way that Mojaloop want to recommend. I'm not sure you have already mentioned it in this meeting or previous meeting. I would appreciate if you can share it briefly again, and can you please share the documentation for that? So that's my second question. And the third one is that one of the adopter from the project that we are working on requested to set the fee amount, half fee amount, and along with other DFSB transaction amount in the settlement process. So currently, what we are doing in the current project is that we only set the transaction amount in each settlement window. We set the other fee like the payer fee or head fee separate with that those transaction fee. We set those fee separately weekly or monthly. That's what we are currently doing. But if you have any better idea with current Mojaloop setup or configuration, please let me know. And if we don't have that functionality as well, can we request you to add in the roadmap? I mean the settling fee, head fee, and other fee information along with the transaction amount in the settlement process. Yeah, those are my questions. Thank you.
That's really good feedback. Thank you. On those 3 points, expanding the data requirement within the QR code, the 2-phase commit versus the Mojaloop 3-phase, and the settlement fee months. On the first two, I want to engage with you directly so we can expand further on what you're saying, and so I get the detail of what you mean. I get it accurately for the roadmap. So I will come back to you on those directly. On the third one, you had already shared that information with us, and you are highlighting quite rightly that we haven't got back to you on this. So I will prioritize our reply to your proposal as a matter of urgency. So yeah, I think your requirements or your points here, E, are extremely relevant to real world implementations and deployments, and I wholeheartedly welcome your input. So thank you very much on this.
Thank you, Paul. I will text you the detail in Slack as well.
Yeah, we can have a chat on Slack, and I can make sure that we incorporate or consider what you're saying and make sure we can resolve any of those issues. I'm very, very grateful to you for raising that. Does anyone else have any points they want to make? No? Okay, great. Thank you. I will make this presentation available on the Product Council channel, and I'll share a summary of this meeting as well. So for now, we can close this meeting and reconvene to look at the long-term roadmap at the next session. So thank you all very much, and see you soon.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.